Beatriz Gomez of the Oakville Conservation Association. Beatriz studies include biotechnology engineering, postgrads in natural resource management and education, and a master's in watershed management. In today's presentation, Beatriz will be sharing how their outreach and stewardship programs are empowering the community and introducing the notion that we can all do something positive about the ecosystem surrounding us. Please welcome Beatriz to talk more about the power of community involvement in environmental initiatives.
Thank you very much, Emily. And I think I'm glad that my presentation follows Tamara, because I do think that there are some things that we have in common and some things that we share, at least in our goals and the focus on education and stewardship. So as Emily mentioned, I am from a group that is called Oakvillegreen. And as you can guess, we are a small non-for-profit, and we are in Oakville, which is part of Halton region. And I am the programs director there. So part of my role is to ensure that that our programs on the ground happen and that we have proper community involvement and volunteers in order to be able to, we can actually reach our goals. Before I start, I want to do a land acknowledgement. So I would like to start by respectfully acknowledging that the area where I live and work today is known as Halton, in which is rich in the history and modern traditions of the First Nations and the Métis from the lands of the Atawandon and the Haudenosaunee and the Métis. These lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we are in solidarity with Indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect the four directions: lands, water, plants, animals, and ancestors that walked before us, and all of the wonderful elements of the creation that exist. We acknowledge and thank the Mississauga of the Credit First Nations for being stewards of the traditional territory. And with that, I would like, as I mentioned, to keep, oh, sorry, I don't know why okay. There you go. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we are in Oakvillegreen. We are a grassroots non-for-profit organization that works in Oakville, and we have three main focus, like habitat restoration or action, where we take action projects with community members on the field, like on the ground. Then we have a portion of education, and we work a lot with school groups, with corporations, and with the general public. And then we do advocacy as well. So we try to influence the policies that are at the municipal and the regional and the provincial level. And we work in close collaboration with the Town of Oakville, Halton region, and even like the Conservation Authority as well, to ensure that like all our programs are aligned with their own goals and objectives while we engage the community in education projects. So we are, as I mentioned, a small organization, but all the work that we do is based on community involvement and volunteers. We rely heavily on them. We are, depending on the time of the year and the funding, we can be from 3 staff to 5 or 6, I think has been our maximum. I have been with the organization for almost 9 years now, and we have had ups and downs, but I'm really proud of the work we do with the resources that we have. And again, most of what we do is thanks to the involvement of the community. So we have worked, Oakvillegreen was founded in 1999 and was incorporated in 2000. So in the past like 21 years, we have worked at 78 different green areas in Oakville. And as part of like, I guess, a natural transition from like our environmental education and the walks that we were doing, the webinars and the urban forest tree plantings, we started incorporating some invasive species removals. We started really easily just with garlic mustard, removing garlic mustard before our tree plantings, but then it has changed and morphed into like a more holistic approach where we have incorporated other species that are in those specific locations as well. So I know that like the past 2 years have been pretty weird, but in the years previous to the pandemic, we were able to involve about 2,000 volunteers in about 40 events per year, involved some type of invasive species removal or management. We removed around 20 trucks, again, depending on the year, of buckthorn, and garlic mustard, about like 70 of those like big garbage bags. And again, I know these efforts are not there just to like are part of a very important education and stewardship component. So this is not to substitute what the municipalities are doing or what the contractors are doing for the municipality. This is just an addition to the work that is being done. And we see it more as an opportunity to raise awareness and to make sure that that people are aware of what's going on in their own homes and the places where they live. Right. And the reason why I think Oakvillegreen was founded, and the reason why our work is so important, just like any other areas of the GTA, Oakville's urban forests are heavily impacted by several threats, and one of them is definitely invasive species. The town has an urban forest health report card for most of the major woodlots that are in Oakville, and in most of them, we do have a heavy presence of invasive species, and they have been identified locally. And that's one of the things that we do with our volunteers. So early detection and making sure that they are out there on the ground and they know how to identify plants. And sometimes they use, we teach them to use like EdMaps or iNaturalist, things like that, just so they are with the species and they can help us to understand where they are, because it is impossible, or sometimes impossible, for municipalities or conservation authorities to be aware of everything that is happening when the pieces of land are so big, right? And that's where volunteers can have a very important role. So here are some of the species that we have tackled. As I mentioned, we started very easily with garlic mustard. I think our efforts have been very heavily inclining to the European buckthorn, which I think it's a major woodlot species that we find here, at least in Oakville. And all these invasive species have become like a very important aspect of our habitat restoration projects. And although we understand that it's not realistic to think that we can actually tackle all of them, we do believe in the power of education and how having more educated eyes on the field can have an important effect moving forward. As I said, especially like on early detection and monitoring. Like why we decided to include the community, or why did you think it's important to do it, to have like community involvement in grassroots actions? When people have the connections with the places where you are working, or the places where is a place where they live, is a place where they play, where they walk their dogs, then that emotional connection is there, so they're more likely to want to protect it. Stewardship opportunities are a great way to educate that community. So it should be part, or an important part, of all like municipal and regional pest management plans. It can help to raise awareness in the community. And we know, at least in Oakville, that it has helped to reduce the amount of complaints received during removals. Personally, I can say that when we started doing invasive species removal, specifically buckthorn, we were getting a lot of complaints from people in those neighborhoods complaining about us removing some of the greenery or the bushes, like people not understanding what an invasive species was. They were just concerned about the beautification of the area or privacy sometimes into their property, right? So education is important. And after we started incorporating more education into our projects and being part, or in collaboration with the town, I know some of the complaints that the town was receiving were reduced after that. And we understand that government and large corporations can work at a larger scale, but we think that it is wise not to overlook the potential and the power that individuals and communities can have. We have very, very cool examples in Oakville where volunteers that after coming to some of our events and getting familiar with some of the invasive species in their areas, starting going out probably every weekend. We have a family that even bought their own extractigators and started removing buckthorn. Of course with some guidance and part of their own property, but still, like, I think it's it's impressive the difference that you can see there. We do have examples of churches that did the same thing and transformed their lands. And of course, not only the removal, but it's just like as a wood lot management plan or a ravine plan, or depending where the area is, to like plant after that and then monitoring after. And that's where community can be a huge piece and a huge component of that. And with the right capacity and knowledge, I think every individual has a capacity to become a change maker and an advocate for nature and for their own like their own habitat restoration and protection of the habitat of the areas around where they live. Right? And as I mentioned before, it's not only because of the manpower, but at the same time, I think early detection and prevention can be some of the most important aspects of education. If people understand what are some of the species that they should not be planting in their gardens, or why they should avoid them, what are some of the options they can plant instead of that. So I think it's important because, as we all know, most of those invasive species made it out into our woodlots because of poor management from homeowners. So it is it's a good opportunity to prevent those from happening in the future. Now, who we work with, we do have a group of like corporate groups. We work with both school boards that are present in the area. We work with private schools as well. We worked with youth groups outside of our organization. We have what we call the Oka Youth Stewards, which is a group of mostly high school students that work with us in various events throughout the year. We work with sports teams with multicultural groups, senior groups, and the general public. So we try to cover a wide variety of audiences depending on the areas and what we want to do. Now, we are always trying to connect with the community and reach out outside of our own circles. If not, it would be kind of like preaching to the choir. So we try to get away as much as possible. We don't want it to be like a one-way communication. So we try to listen to the perspectives and understand where people are coming from. Like some of those, as I mentioned before, that have complained before, understand where they're coming from, explain. I do believe that people, when they are, most people, when they are taught and explain what are the problems and some of the threats and what other species they can put instead of what can be done instead, people are willing to take action and become part of the solution. Right, like then I wanted to talk a little bit about what we do when we are at the events. So of course, not all sites are suitable for volunteers to be out and removing invasive species. So first we do, as I mentioned before, we worked really closely with the Town of Oakville, with Conservation Halton or with Halton region, depending on who's managing those woodlots. And we make sure that whatever we are doing is aligned with the plans that they have, with the integrated pest management, that we understand what are the best practices that they want us to follow while we are on the field. And then after that, we try to get the volunteers involved or enrolled in some education components before the event happens. So sometimes we do webinars, we can do walks around. We ensure that people understand and can identify the plants that they're going to be removing, that they know how to safely use the equipment, use normal safety, health and safety talks when we are outside with them, so they can be aware of like the environment, the weather, their surroundings, or other threats that may be possible outside. So it's important to make sure that you're always working to ensure volunteer safety and that they come back, right, because they feel safe before, during, and after. Training is key, supervision, and then of course at the end, recognition as well. We work, as I mentioned before, with a lot of high school students, and I have found that if you offer pizza, then you get a lot of hands on deck and a lot of kids that would actually show up. We offer volunteer hours for them as well, and working with specific groups. So we have examples as well of corporations that have decided to work on a woodlot that is close to their offices, and then they come back year after year. So that helps us not only to like monitor, but the impact is more evident, not only for them, but for the community as well. So yeah, so those type of projects and those type of examples are always exciting to see. So yeah, so basically our programs are based on empowering people and making sure that they are connected to the area where they live. And it's amazing to see the transformation from kids, again, that probably arrive with not a lot of motivation because their parents made them go to the events. When they get into it, I would have to say that buckthorn is probably one of their favorites to remove, right? Because it makes them feel empowered. And but yeah, I think almost everybody gets very into it and excited about being able to like help in the long term if they understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. So I think that's it. There's my contact information if anybody wants to copy it right now. I'm sure that's going to probably be shared after as well.
Great. Thank you so much for that presentation, Beatriz. I just want to say that community involvement is definitely a really important component of invasive species management. And I do have some experience doing that as well. Once you get people engaged and they understand the value of what they're doing, it gets a lot better, and we can actually have early detection and make a difference. You may have touched on this at the beginning, but what kind of relationship does Oakvillegreen have with the municipality, and is there data sharing opportunities to align efforts?
Yeah, thank you. So that's a very good question. So we do have a good relationship with them. We work mostly in public lands, right? So we need to have not only good relationship with them, but their permission to go into the municipality and removing invasive species in there, because we are a non-for-profit, right? So we do have a good relationship with them. We talk with them every year. We sit down at least twice a year to try to come up with ideas on locations where they want us to work. We'll look at what are the priorities. We try to do it at like a site assessment and get what are some of the things that need to be done in there and tackled. Sometimes because we are on the ground more than they are, we are the ones that can actually understand what are some of the invasive species that are in the area and try to tackle those. So we do have a good relationship with them. If anything comes up, like we are in constant communication. But I would say it's key to the success of our programs as well. We don't receive like funding from them, so we are not funded by the municipality, but we do have their support, and I think that comes with like after many years of building that relationship.
What's the involvement of the elected councilors as well in this community engagement?
Yeah, sure. So we do have like close relations with a lot of them. So we tend to have a lot of correspondence with them. We invited to the events. A lot of them come out. A lot of the times we have had counselors in like heels that are there for the picture, obviously, but a lot of them are really involved. So I think it's hit and miss depending on the counselor, but most of them are amazing. Like I think we have pretty strong council in Oakville, at least.
Great. All right. Thank you so much for that presentation.